Spring of 1940. The Western Front has been so quiet that the British newspapers have begun calling this the Phony War. Churchill, who has been criticizing the British government for not taking the Nazis seriously since before Hitler took power, is not yet anywhere near power. Chamberlain does not want to provoke a massive war of air fleets, and he still thinks the negotiations could work. After all, the only fighting has been in the East. So he has ordered a series of leaflet bombings against Germany's industrial areas in the West, because leaflets don't kill anyone, and you don't want to really, upset the Germans and make them angry, because then they'll just send bombers over and kill Englishmen. On the Western Front, the French are hiding behind one of the great dreams of the interwar period. Here's the dream. Remembering how many young Frenchmen were killed in World War I, and remembering that the Germans have a larger population and a much larger industrial base than the French have got to find a way to equalize or somehow multiply the forces they have. Around 1929, 1930, the defense minister, André Maginot, comes up with the idea of a series of underground fortifications. And these fortifications are going to bear his name. They will be called the Maginot Line. Now, these are amazing fortifications, and they're built. And the majority of France's defense budget is not spent modernizing their tanks or their rifles or encouraging them to have a lot of maneuvers. It's building concrete and steel underground. So you have, instead of trenches, a series of underground bases connected by an underground railway system. No, we're not talking about Harriet Tubman and the freeing of American slaves from south to north. A real, literal underground railroad going under the ground to connect these various French fortified positions along the Maginot Line. Now, the bases themselves have these clever pop turrets. You've got what looks like a peaceful hillside with bushes, and all of a sudden, the top of the hill pops up, and under the bushes, you've got these guns swiveling around on like a battleship turret. They shoot, and then they're down, and counterfire comes in, but they're already back inside their armored protection. These Maginot defenses are a series of large guns, small guns, machine gun pillboxes, concrete and steel underground fortifications. So the French are going to fight, in some cases, in air-conditioned comfort, because the air conditioning is also designed to have positive pressure inside and keep out poison gas. So the French invest in this amazing system known as the Maginot Line. And despite what a lot of historians say, I have to admit, it works to the extent it was designed to work. Let me explain. The French and the Belgians, they got along, and France didn't want to offend Belgium by building a series of forts along their border. After all, Belgium hadn't invaded France for a series of time over the last 100 years. So the French stopped the Maginot Line here along the Luxembourg border. And instead of extending their line to the North Sea, they simply deepen and intensify the defensive fortifications they have here. I don't know if you see the problem. It's like building a wall between us and Mexico to keep out illegal aliens, but only building it in places like El Paso, Texas, and San Diego, California, and not really building it in the countryside between them. So here you have this Great Wall of France, this Maginot Line, this series of extremely clever underground fortifications. And the French basically assume that all they have to do is wait for Germany to come, and the Germans will be slaughtered, dying on the Maginot defenses, like a fly going into a bug zapper. What that means is the French were never going to help the Poles. They were never coming, because the Germans knew something that the Poles didn't. They had spies, and they understood the French psychology, and the French psychology was, we're not risking our men in open battle when we can keep them inside the Maginot Line. So the Poles were hoping for a French attack that was never going to come. Now, because when war starts, these people aren't completely stupid, there is an appreciation that maybe what you need to do is extend your defenses along the Belgian frontier. So there is an effort to have lesser Maginot-style defenses along the southern area of the Belgian frontier. But there isn't time or money to build it along the entire frontier. So what the French then do, and the British, is they make a plan to put the best armies in terms of mobile fighting that the French have along the Belgian frontier, the British army as well, waiting. Now, the French expect another 1914-style Schlieffen attack, where the Germans go like a broad front through Belgium and Luxembourg and maybe Holland this time, womp, to try to surround and isolate the city of Paris. That's what everyone expects. So what the plan is, that is set up by General Gamelin, who's the Allied Supreme Commander, the French General Gamelin, who has a headquarters dozens of miles away from the front line without any telephones. He relies on couriers, because couriers scooting along on motorcycles and in cars is the way warfare used to be conducted. So the Supreme Commander of the Allied armies doesn't have a telephone. Anyway, the plan is this. The British and the mobile French forces are going to wheel into Belgium when the Germans begin their attack. Now, why can't they do this beforehand? Because Belgium is screaming to the high heavens, we're neutral, don't fight us. We're neutral, don't fight us. We're harmless. We're like a cute little guinea pig. Don't hurt us. But the British and French expect that the Germans are going to march in anyway, because that's what they did in World War I, and Germans at war, they're not very sentimental. Guinea pig gets in the way, squish guinea pig. So the King of Belgium, a different king from in World War I, refuses to allow the French and British into Belgian territory to protect Belgium from what seems to be an inevitable German attack, because the Belgian king is going, no, I'm not neutral. So they're going to have to wait until the Germans attack from the east, and only then will the British and French move up to the Deal Canal, which is a line partway through Belgium, and maybe they'll go up to the city of Breda in Holland. And they're going to hold this line with mobile forces. Now, what the British and French do all winter is they build a series of fortifications here, trench warfare style, that they're going to immediately leave when the fighting starts in the east. So the plan is for the Maginot defenses to hold, and for the best units in the British and French army to wheel forward to the Deal Canal in Belgium. Okay. While all of this is waiting, while the war still seems phony, there are a series of battles at sea, which I'm not going to go into right now, and Hitler does something surprising. Sweden suddenly becomes super important to everyone, because Sweden has massive iron ore reserves. Mines rapidly produce the iron ore. And iron ore is the basis, one of the bases, along with rubber and oil, and electrical cable, of modern warfare. Without iron, you don't have steel. Without steel, you don't have guns, tanks, planes, any of that. Now, Sweden's mines are in northern Sweden. And the Germans are afraid that the British are going to invade Norway and capture the Swedish mines to deny the Swedish iron ore to the Germans. And they're right. The British under Churchill, who's now the head of the Admiralty, who's the head of the British Navy under Chamberlain, Churchill is actually planning an invasion of Norway. But in typical early war British fashion, it's inefficient and takes time to work up. When the Germans get wind of this, they very quickly come up with a amazingly clever and innovative battle plan. Without warning, suddenly, in spring 1940, Denmark is invaded, and a group of German warships, which just happen to be off the major cities of Norway, land troops. But more than that, the Germans have an airborne army of paratroops that they have flown into position, and they start landing parachute troops behind the Norwegian lines, so that by the time Norway realizes there's an attack going on, they're already surrounded by parachute troops. The British and the Germans at sea clash because the British and Germans basically pick the same invasion day. It's an accident, but Britain's emphasis is on northern Norway. In a series of sea battles, the British and German navies nullify one another, but the German Air Force is much more powerful than the British Royal Air Force off the Norwegian coast and above Norway's cities. So within a few weeks, within a week, really, Hitler captures Denmark in a few hours and Norway in a couple of weeks. They fight the British and drive them out. This finally brings down Neville Chamberlain's appeasement-oriented government. Up until the spring of 1940, Chamberlain has managed to hold on to power because no one trusts Churchill. No one. Because he shifted parties back in the day, and he wasn't loyal to the Conservative Party under Chamberlain. He didn't play politics. He kept warning the world, even to the embarrassment of people like Neville Chamberlain, about how dangerous Hitler was and how something needed to be done now. One other thing before we go on and shift away from Norway. Just like the term fifth columnist comes from the Spanish Civil War, a new word comes to the English language. It's called quisling. Vidkun Quisling was the head of Norway's fascist party. And Quisling actively worked against Norway's interests for the Germans. And he was given as a reward the governor generalship of Nazi-controlled Norway. The name Quisling is synonymous in modern parlance with a real hardcore traitor. Quisling betrayed his country for the sake of power and for the sake of making it a national socialist or a fascist country. And after the war, he was executed for his treason. So if somebody calls someone else a Quisling, it means that they are a traitor. Next up, as spring moves on towards summer and April moves on towards May, we are going to shift from Scandinavia to France.